Glad to see you. We're covering 4 chan threads tonight that are messed up and deeply wrong. The kind of posts that stay with you. Like the video, subscribe, volume high, and we're in. The red paint on Adrian's newest canvas was still warm when I held my hand near it. It was December 2021 at a private viewing near Miami's Design District. I worked for an art advisory firm. My client Lila asked me to come because she wanted a second opinion before bidding. The gallery was in a white building off North Miami Avenue. No sign, just a brass number beside a black door. A man checked our names on an iPad and locked the door after us. Private galleries sometimes did that during expensive showings. There were about 12 guests. Lila introduced me to Peter, an older collector, and to Owen and Claire from Palm Beach. The curator was Julian, thin and nervous in a cream jacket. The artist stood alone near the back wall. His name was Adrian. Tall, pale, dark hair tied behind his neck. He held a glass of water and watched everyone move through the room. He did not smile when Julian introduced him. The collection was called Residue. The paintings were large, dark canvases layered with gray and deep red. Some areas had been scraped flat, others had thick ridges under the track lights. Julian said Adrian mixed pigment with an organic binding material. A few people laughed. It sounded like gallery language for wax or some old technique. The room smelled of air conditioning and wine. Near the paintings was a sharp, metallic odor. I assumed it came from construction nearby. Around 8, Julian gathered us around a canvas covered with black cloth. He said Adrian had completed it that afternoon. When he pulled the cloth away, the room went quiet. The painting showed a seated person with no face. A bright red band crossed the center, wet enough to drip. Claire asked, "Is that resin?" Adrian answered from behind us, "No." That was the first thing I heard him say. Julian began talking about memory and the body. I leaned closer to the lower corner. A bead of red had formed beside the frame and it was moving. I did condition reports, so I knew how to check a surface without touching it. I held my hand an inch from the canvas. The paint gave off heat. Not much, about the warmth of skin. I looked at the light above it. LED, barely warm. Then I smelled iron. It reminded me of the taste after biting the inside of your cheek. Lila whispered, "What are you doing?" "I think this is still wet." Julian heard me. He said it had been finished recently. How recently? This afternoon. I asked what Adrian used for the red. Julian's expression changed for a second. A proprietary mixture. Adrian was staring at me. I backed away. There had to be a normal explanation. Some paints cure hot, and thick material traps heat. I was not going to accuse anyone in front of a room full of buyers. A server passed with champagne. I took a glass and moved on. A few minutes later, I noticed a dark red smear on Julian's cuff. He saw me looking and tugged his sleeve down. I asked where the restroom was. He pointed toward a hallway behind the reception desk. There were 3 doors, one said restroom, one had a keypad, and the last was slightly open. I used the restroom first. The vent rattled and my phone showed 1 bar. When I came out, the plain door was still open. I heard a low hum inside. I should have gone back. Instead, I pushed the door wider. The room held frames, blankets, and rolls of canvas. A steel table stood under fluorescent lights. It was colder there, and the iron smell mixed with bleach. At first, I thought the bare foot behind the table belonged to a mannequin. Then the toes moved. A young woman lay under a gray blanket. She wore a white slip cut at one shoulder. Tape circled one wrist. A dark bandage covered her upper arm. I knelt beside her, her eyes open. "Please," she whispered. I asked her name. "Mara." I pulled out my phone. She caught my sleeve before I could dial. "He comes back." I tried 911 anyway. The call failed. I tried again. The door clicked shut behind me. I grabbed the handle. It opened an inch and stopped. Someone had locked it from the hall. I hit the door with my palm. "Julian, open this." No answer. Mara tried to sit up. I told her to stay down. On the table were stained towels, glass jars, and a metal tray. I looked away before I could sort out what I was seeing. A second door led to an office with a dead phone and 4 security feeds. One feed showed the gallery. The guests were drinking and talking. Julian stood near the new painting. Adrian was gone. A ring of keys lay beside the keyboard. I took it and tried them on the storage room door. The 3rd key worked. When I stepped into the hallway, Adrian was waiting at the far end. He had removed his jacket. In his hand was a palette knife almost as long as my forearm, narrow and bent near the tip. He said, "You should not be back here." There is an injured woman in that room. She is part of the work." He said it like he was correcting a label. I pulled the door shut behind me and backed toward the gallery. Adrian followed at a walking pace. I shouted for Julian. The music stopped. Everyone turned as I entered. I said there was a badly hurt woman in the back and told someone to call the police. Peter took out his phone. No signal. Owen went to the entrance and pulled the handle. Locked. Metal shutters covered the glass door. They must have lowered during the music. Julian raised his hands. "Everybody needs to stay calm." I pointed at Adrian. "He locked me in with her." Lila looked at the blade. "Why does he have that?" Julian said Adrian's name softly, like he was trying to settle a dog. Adrian ignored him. He locked the hallway door, then slipped the key ring into his pocket. Owen grabbed a bronze sculpture shaped like a folded arm. He needed both hands. "You open the door," Owen said. Adrian took one step toward me. Peter shoved a narrow display table into his path. Glass bowls slid off and shattered. Adrian swung the palette knife. The point sliced Peter's jacket near the shoulder. Peter stumbled back, staring at the cut. That was when everyone moved. Claire threw a wine bottle. It burst against the wall. Lila pulled me behind a canvas while Julian ran for the desk. Adrian went after him. Julian ducked. The knife struck the wooden counter and left a deep line across it. Owen came from the side and hit Adrian in the ribs with the bronze sculpture. Adrian went down, but kept hold of the blade. I ran to the hallway door and tried the keys I'd taken from the office. None fit. The lock needed the ring in Adrian's pocket. Mara hit the door from inside. Once. Then again. Weaker. I yelled that we had to get her out. Lila and Claire dragged a bench over and we rammed it into the door. The frame shook. The lock held. Behind us, Owen shouted. Adrian was back on his feet. Blood ran from his lip. He moved toward Owen with the palette knife held low. Peter grabbed his wrist. They hit a pedestal and a ceramic piece broke. Adrian twisted free and cut Peter's sleeve. Peter dropped to one knee. Owen swung the sculpture again. Adrian stepped back. The bronze struck the front display window. A crack spread through the glass. Owen looked at it and hit the same spot again. The window bowed outward but did not break apart. It was laminated safety glass. "Again!" I yelled. Adrian turned toward him. I picked up a broken glass bowl and threw it. It hit Adrian near the ear. He looked at me, more surprised than hurt. Owen swung a third time. The window turned white with cracks. A section folded toward the sidewalk, letting in damp night air. Owen kicked the opening until it widened. Claire crawled through first. Lila followed. Peter went next, holding his arm against his chest. I looked back toward the hallway. Julian was behind the desk, pulling open drawers. "Get Mara," I shouted. He looked at the locked door. "I can't." Adrian was between us now. He came at me fast. I climbed onto the broken display platform and pushed through the window. Glass caught the back of my coat and pulled me halfway down. I twisted one arm free. Someone outside grabbed my wrist and dragged me onto the pavement. Julian came through behind me. Adrian reached the opening and stopped. For a second I thought he would follow us. Then he turned toward the hallway. A security guard from across the street was running over. His name was Mateo. He had seen the window break on camera. Mateo drew his weapon and ordered Adrian to drop the knife. Adrian kept walking inside, toward Mara. Mateo climbed through the broken window. Owen went in behind him. There was shouting, then a hard crash. Police cars arrived less than 2 minutes later. They found Adrian on the floor. Mateo had struck his wrist with a baton when Adrian rushed him. Owen sat on his legs. The knife was under a chair. Officers opened the hallway and brought Mara out on a stretcher. She was alive. I saw her looking around behind an oxygen mask as they rolled her past the broken window. Julian was arrested before midnight. Rain started while detectives interviewed us. Wet glass near the curb flashed blue under the police lights. My coat smelled like wine and bleach. A paramedic found a cut across my palm. A detective called me several weeks later. The red material on the unfinished painting matched Mara's blood. Older paintings contained blood from other people. Some samples were too damaged to identify, but several matched evidence from missing person cases in South Florida. The gallery stayed closed. Plywood covered the window for months. At trial, prosecutors showed a close photograph of the canvas I had leaned over that night. Near the bottom edge, inside the red layer, there was part of a fingerprint. It belonged to Mara. The scream came while I was looking at a price sheet for a procedure I had already decided I couldn't afford. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February 2023. I was alone in a private clinic on Wilshire, a few blocks east of Rodeo Drive. The lobby looked like a hotel bar with cream chairs and smoked glass. A bowl of green apples sat untouched. The air smelled of lemon cleaner. My consultation was with Dr. Rourke. A woman from work named Tessa had recommended him after he fixed a scar along her jaw. His website showed women photographed against the same gray wall. I arrived at 1:40 for a 2 o'clock appointment. At 2:15, Dr. Rourke came out himself. He wore navy scrubs under a white coat. Reading glasses hung from his collar. "Staff training day," he said. "We're running light." There was no receptionist or nurse. He let me in, then locked the front door. He said the staff were at a seminar in Century City. That sounded normal enough. Private clinics keep odd hours, and his reviews were good. We sat in his office and talked about my nose. He took photos on an iPad, turned my face toward the window, then showed me a simulation. I didn't like it. The nose on the screen was too small and smooth. It looked copied from someone else. "I want something subtle," I said. "Of course." He adjusted it. The second version was better, but seeing my face change, that quickly bothered me. Then the scream came. It was short. A woman's voice from behind the office wall. I looked at the door. Dr. Rourke didn't. Was that someone? Building noise. It sounded like a person. The dental suite upstairs has an anxious patient. Sound travels through the service shafts. I had worked in old offices. Sound traveled in stupid ways, so I accepted it for a few minutes. He started explaining facial balance. A metal tray hit the floor somewhere down the hall. That sound was close. "Is there a procedure happening here today?" I asked. "No." "Then what was that?" "One of the cleaners may be in back." He stood. I thought he was going to check. Instead, he shut the office door. The latch clicked. I gave a nervous laugh. "Can we reschedule?" "There's no need." "I'd rather come back when your staff is here." He placed the iPad on his desk. "I'll get your paperwork." He left through a second door behind the desk. I heard his steps fade, then another door open. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then someone said, "Help me." It was barely louder than a breath. I stood up. The office opened into a hallway lined with photos. Most of the ceiling lights were off. Through the front windows, I could see traffic on Wilshire. 2 people walked past with shopping bags, maybe 30 feet away behind glass and a locked door. I went down the hall. There were 4 rooms. Consultation. 2. Imaging. Recovery. Procedure. 1. The first 3 were empty. Recovery had 2 recliners and a small machine humming under the counter. The room smelled like rubbing alcohol. Procedure 1 was locked. I put my ear to the door. A woman was breathing on the other side. She sped up when she heard me. "Please," she said, "can you open the door?" "No, he has the code." "Are you hurt?" She made a sound that could have been yes. There was a keypad beside the handle. I tried 2023, red light, then 0223, red again. Footsteps came from behind me. Dr. Rourke stood at the end of the hall. He had removed his white coat. In one hand he held a folder, in the other a small black remote. "You shouldn't be back here. There's someone in that room. She's recovering. You said there were no procedures today." He looked at the locked door, then at me. He wasn't embarrassed or surprised. That was when I knew I was in trouble. "Come back to my office," he said. I moved toward the lobby. He pressed the remote. A heavy lock clicked near the front door. "My phone is in my bag," I said. It was in my coat pocket. My bag was beside his desk, and I wanted him looking the wrong way. He glanced toward the office. I pulled out my phone and called 911. 1 bar vanished. The call didn't connect. He walked toward me. "That part of the building blocks reception," he said. "Put it down." I backed into recovery and shut the door. There was no lock. I dragged a recliner against it, but the wheels rolled badly and the chair turned sideways. Dr. Rourke pushed from the hall. The door opened 6 inches. "You're making this worse." I shoved the chair with my hip and got the door closed again. On the counter was a wall phone, no dial tone. The machine under the counter was a surgical laser on wheels with a coiled handpiece clipped to the side. Dr. Rourke had shown me one while explaining skin resurfacing. The door opened a few more inches. I pulled the laser toward me. Its wheels squeaked. A key was already in the panel. Dr. Rourke stopped pushing. "Don't touch that." A card hung from the handle. Power. "Stand by. Ready. Foot control." I had no idea how dangerous it was, but he didn't want me near it. "Open the front door." The woman signed consent forms. "Then let her tell me." He pushed again. The recliner slid. I turned the key. The display lit with a sharp beep. I picked up the handpiece. It felt like a thick marker attached to a hose. Dr. Rourke stepped back from the gap. "Put that down before you injure yourself." I aimed it at the doorway, though I didn't know how to fire it. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then the woman in Procedure 1 screamed again. She kept going until her voice broke. I looked at the ceiling. A smoke detector was directly above the recovery chairs. Beside it was a sprinkler head. I found the foot pedal under the cart and pressed. A bright point flashed across the ceiling. It smelled like hot plastic and burned dust. I moved the handpiece toward the detector and pressed again. The alarm exploded overhead. I dropped the laser. Red lights strobed in the hallway. A recorded voice ordered evacuation. Magnetic locks released one after another. Dr. Rourke swore and ran toward the front. I kicked the recliner aside and followed. The front door was unlocked now, but I went to Procedure 1. The keypad had gone dark. The handle opened. The woman inside was strapped into a surgical chair. Her name was Mara. She told me while I worked at the buckles. Her head was wrapped in gauze with openings for her eyes and mouth. One side was stained through. Clear tubing ran under her nose. Marker lines crossed her neck. Tape pulled the skin near her temples. I tried not to look closely. Her wrists were secured with padded straps. "He changed the lock," she said. Her words were thick. "He said I moved." I released one wrist. The other buckle was jammed. The alarm kept repeating. I heard doors opening outside the clinic and people calling to each other. Dr. Rourke came back. He stood in the doorway holding a syringe. "Move away from her." I stood between him and the chair. "People are coming." "This is a medical emergency. You're interfering with treatment." Mara raised her free hand and pointed at him. Dr. Rourke looked toward the hall. The elevator bell rang near the lobby. He set the syringe on a tray. Then he smiled, calm again, like we were in his office discussing my profile. "You came because you wanted a different face," he said. "I can give you one. Choose hers or anyone from the photographs." On the wall behind the chair were headshots I hadn't noticed. At least 20 women. Some had circles around their eyes or mouths. One photo was Mara before the bandages. Another was Tessa. I knew it because she had sent me the same picture after her surgery. Her jaw scar wasn't in it. Dr. Rourke saw where I was looking. She was very pleased. The elevator bell rang again. Someone shouted, "Fire department." Dr. Rourke backed out. He walked quickly toward the service corridor, then disappeared through a gray door marked staff only. I got Mara's second wrist free. Her knees buckled when she stood, so I wrapped one arm around her and took most of her weight. She wore a thin robe and one disposable shoe. The tile felt slick under my boots. We reached the lobby as two men from upstairs came in with extinguishers. One held the front door open. Outside, the afternoon sun hurt my eyes. People crowded the sidewalk near the parking entrance, some filming. An officer helped me lower Mara onto a concrete planter. I told him the surgeon had gone toward the service elevator. Police arrived before the fire crew finished checking the panel. Officers found Dr. Rourke in the loading area behind the building, wearing a coat over his scrubs and carrying a black hard case. He had tried to leave through the alley toward South Santa Monica Boulevard. The case held several phones and memory cards labeled with first names. I gave my statement until after dark. Mara went to Cedars-Sinai. A detective named Joe called me 2 days later and asked about Tessa. I said she was the person who referred me. There was a pause. Joe asked when I had last spoken to her. I checked our messages. Tessa had sent me the clinic link 3 weeks earlier. After that, nothing. Her work email had been disabled and our manager thought she'd moved to Arizona. Police found 6 women connected to the photographs. Some had been reported missing under their old names. 2 were living nearby with altered faces and medical records that didn't match their stories. Nobody told me how many other images were on the cards. Mara survived. I saw her once in a courthouse hallway. She wore a scarf and large sunglasses indoors. She squeezed my hand and said the alarm was the clearest thing she remembered. Dr. Rourke was brought in through a side door. For a moment he turned toward us. His eyes went to my nose. Then he smiled. I bought an old couch from a yard sale outside Louisville in July 2015, and I almost put it in my house before I found out why the owner was getting rid of everything. I was renting a small place near Jeffersontown at the time. My living room was basically empty, except for a cheap TV stand and a folding chair I had been using for months. I had just started a new job and was trying to save money. So when I saw a Craigslist post for a moving sale, with furniture priced almost nothing, I drove out there. The house was in a quiet neighborhood east of Louisville, not far from the area around Fern Creek. It was one of those older brick houses with a narrow driveway and a garage that looked like it had not been opened in years. The person running the sale was a woman named Karen. She was sitting in a lawn chair near the driveway, writing prices on small pieces of cardboard. "You looking for anything specific?" she asked. "Honestly, just a couch," I said, "something that isn't falling apart." She pointed toward the garage. The brown one inside is still good. The owner took care of his things. The owner was an older man named Walter. At least that was what Karen told me. She said he had lived there for decades and had recently moved in with relatives because he was getting older. I remember thinking the house looked like someone had left in a hurry, but I figured that was normal. When older people move, especially after living somewhere for a long time, there's usually a lot of stuff left behind. The garage smelled like old wood, dust, and the kind of gasoline smell you get around lawn equipment. The couch was pushed against the back wall. It was a dark brown leather couch with a few scratches on the arms, but it was in much better shape than anything I had seen online. I ran my hand across the seat. The leather was cool and cracked in places. "How much?" I asked. Karen looked over at it. $40. I paid her. She even helped me load it into my truck. That should have been the end of it. The first thing I noticed when I got home was that the couch was heavier than it looked. I had moved furniture before, and usually the weight made sense. This one felt like there was something packed underneath it. I figured it was just the frame. My neighbor helped me carry it inside, and after we set it down, I spent a few minutes cleaning it. There was dust in the seams and some old crumbs stuck between the cushions. Nothing strange, just years of use. The next morning I noticed one of the couch cushions was sitting slightly higher than the others. I pulled it up and found a small plastic bag underneath. Inside was an old hearing aid. It was the kind that sat behind the ear, not one of the tiny modern ones. It looked like it had been there for a long time. The plastic bag was dirty, and there were dark brown stains on one corner of it. At first I thought it was rust or dirt. Then I saw the paper folded underneath it. The paper was yellowed and soft. There was a small amount of dried blood on one side, enough that I immediately stopped touching it with my bare hands. The note was written in shaky handwriting. "If you find this, don't trust my nephew." I tried to tell people. Check the bedroom. That was it. No name, no date. I stood there for a while holding the paper and trying to come up with a normal explanation. Old furniture gets weird things inside it, people leave notes, maybe Walter had written something before he moved. Maybe there was some family argument and I had walked into the middle of it. I called Karen, she answered after a few rings. "Hey, it's the guy who bought the couch," I said. "I found something underneath it." There was a pause. "What did you find?" The way she asked that bothered me more than the note. I told her about the hearing aid and the paper. Karen was quiet for a few seconds. "That must have been Walter's. Was he living alone?" "Yes, well, mostly." "What does that mean?" She sighed. "His nephew was helping him. His name is Greg. He handled a lot of things after Walter decided to leave." I looked at the note again. "Where did Walter go?" "He moved in with family." "Which family?" Another pause. "I don't know all the details." That answer stuck with me. I asked her if she knew why there was blood on the note. She said she had no idea and that maybe Walter had cut himself while writing it. She sounded like she wanted the conversation over. I should have stopped there. I probably should have thrown the note away and moved on. Instead, I drove back to the house. The yard sale was still going on. There were fewer items outside now. A table, some old lamps, a box of kitchen supplies. The house looked more empty than it had 2 days earlier. Karen saw me walk up. "You came back." "Yeah, I need to ask about the bedroom." Her face changed. "Why?" "Because the note told me to check it." She looked toward the house. "Don't do that." That was the first time I felt like she knew more than she was saying. I asked if Greg was there. She said he had been around earlier that day but had left. I walked past her and toward the front door anyway. The door was unlocked. The inside smelled different from the garage. There was old carpet, cleaning chemicals, and something sweet like a room spray that had been sprayed too many times. The living room was mostly empty. The walls had lighter squares where pictures used to hang. I went down the hallway. The bedroom was still full. That was the part that made no sense. If Walter had moved out, why were his things still there? There was a bed with a blanket folded at the end, a nightstand, a lamp, a stack of mail, a plastic cup with a little water left inside. On the dresser were several bottles of medication. I picked one up. The label had Walter's name on it. The instructions said to take it every day. There were more bottles beside it. I looked around the room and noticed his clothes were still in the closet. His shoes were lined up near the bed. His reading glasses were sitting on a book. It did not look like someone who had moved. It looked like someone who planned to come back. I heard a car door outside. I walked back to the hallway and saw a man standing near the front entrance. He was probably in his 40s. He had a cardboard box in his hands. "Can I help you?" he asked. I knew it was Greg before he introduced himself. "I bought some furniture from Karen's sale," I said. He stared at me. "What furniture?" "The couch." His expression changed. Where is it? At my house. He put the box down. Did you find anything in it? The question came too fast. I did not answer. Greg looked past me toward the bedroom. Listen, Walter wasn't always clear about things. He was old. He got confused. Where is he? He is with family. Which family? Greg looked annoyed. I don't know what Karen told you, but this isn't your business. That was when I left. I did not argue. I did not show him the note. I got in my truck and drove home. The couch was still sitting in my living room when I arrived. I looked at it differently after that. The same couch I thought was a cheap piece of furniture now felt like something I had dragged into my home without knowing where it came from. I put the note, the hearing aid, and the bag into a clean plastic container. I called the local police department and explained what I had found. They asked questions about the address, the sale, Karen, and Greg. A few hours later, someone came by to take a statement. I never saw the couch again. The officer told me they were looking into Walter's disappearance, but he did not give me many details. 2 days after I bought the couch, the sale had started. That was before anyone officially knew Walter was dead. A week later, I heard from a neighbor who lived near the old house. They said police had found Walter's car outside town on a rural road. His body was inside. They also told me Greg had removed the rest of the furniture from the house the same night after I went there. Karen closed the sale early and never answered my calls again. I left the furniture behind. The police took the note as evidence and I gave the hearing aid to them too. The thing I still remember most is the bedroom, not the note, not the blood. The medication bottles sitting there with the instructions to take them every day, right next to the bed where Walter's glasses were still waiting. That's where the conversation fades and your own thoughts take over. Thanks for making it through every twisted moment. Which narrative's going to echo the longest? Tell me below. There's endless material waiting in the shadows. Don't feel safe. Next time's already here.